The bird itself is so incredibly spectacular. It's the speeds that it flies at. It's a bird that is inherently incredibly wild.
This is the story of the prairie peregrine and people. People like Richard Fife, who began the battle to bring the bird back with the Canadian Wildlife Service more than 25 years ago.
There's a falcon. That's one of the peregrines that they've released. The peregrine in particular became a symbol of what we were doing to the environment. The DDT problem pretty near wiped them out.
DDT, a farm chemical, had made its way up the food chain and been concentrated in the falcons. It made their eggs too fragile. Instead of hatching, they broke.
It came so close that, like, we knew of one pair left here in this province, and that extended all the way through to the East Coast. There's only the one pair left when we took the young into captivity, and it was that close. It was just that close to losing it.
We were effectively sterilizing them, poisoning them with DDT.
Phil Treffry believed people were obligated to undo the damage we'd done. So when Richard Fife offered him a job to start up a peregrine breeding program, he said yes.
At this age, all they do is eat and sleep and grow. And they eat this stuff, which is quail burger.
Over the past quarter century, Treffry has hand-fed 1,670 peregrine chicks. No one quarrels about the work now, but in the beginning, it was a much different story.
People said that, that peregrine falcons wouldn't breed in captivity. And then there were arguments that even if you could produce peregrine falcons in captivity, you wouldn't be able to release them to the wild. They wouldn't survive.
There were people and biologists, my own peers, there were certainly the conservation element, who really felt we shouldn't be doing this, who were strongly opposed to it.
Opposed because starting the program meant raiding the nest of that last wild pair for the original brood stock.
So that was quite a risk. We were contributing in some ways to the decline of the peregrine falcon by taking those last young into captivity. Really, captive breeding is kind of a band-aid solution that you resort to at the very last moment. You know, when you realize that something has gone terribly wrong, and the last resort is to try and captive produce young.
It meant that if you made a mistake, everything you did, you were like you were under a magnifying glass, and you couldn't make a mistake because you knew that there were people out there who wanted to shut you down, who wanted the program to stop.
It was a rocky start and a taste of opposition to come. But in the beginning, the goal was simply to prove it really could be done.
The first few years, it was a struggle to produce just a few young. He's doubled his weight in 4 days. We had problems with artificial incubation. We thought we could hatch the eggs in incubators and had lost a lot of eggs that way, and those were tremendously frustrating years to have your birds produce eggs and then you can't hatch any young. There were a few years there, you know, where every egg that didn't hatch was you know, a real heartbreaker.
That was solved in part by using birds, even other species like this gyrfalcon, to egg sit. One answer found, dozens of vexing questions to go.
I remember banning the birds, just a few young, and they left here and never heard from them again. Presumably, most of those birds died. Boy, are you noisy. There were some release sites where we released a lot of young, and for one reason or another, the site wasn't good. And we got, you know, no birds established there.
You don't mind this at all, do you?
No, he's a good little guy.
It took a decade of effort before it became clear the program was making a difference. The best evidence came winging back, as peregrines usually do, to the place they learned to fly.
And they'd show up when that year's young falcons were starting to learn to fly. You get an adult bird, an adult plumage, dark head, dark back, would come in and interact with your young birds. A banded bird.
In the early 80s, as the number of successful births and releases grew, Phil's future wife Helen was hired on at Wainwright.
This is only hatched in the last hour. When I met Phil at the facility, he was looking for someone who'd come along and help him fly a bird, and I thought, oh, this sounds interesting, and things certainly developed from there.
Helen Treffry quickly developed the same appreciation for peregrines that had drawn her partner 10 years earlier.
I guess I just can't imagine my life without them. If only our kids ate this.
Still, hands-on contact with most of the birds lasts just a few days. Then they're delivered to a pair of falcons in Wainwright's outdoor pens, who feed and protect them. Too much human contact, and the birds forget they belong with other falcons, like Pablo here.
This guy is one of our hand-raised, human-bonded imprints that donate semen. They give us semen for artificial insemination. He was raised by human beings, so he's comfortable with human beings. He looks on human beings as his own kind.
The price for that is a life of captivity. It's comfortable, and it can last 18 years and more. And without the captive falcons, there could be no releases.
So some of his young are probably surviving in the wild somewhere.
That somewhere could be anywhere in North or South America. The Peregrine program is an export business. And once the breeding problems were sorted out, it began delivering peregrines to provincial agencies from across the country for release.
It's easier to send them off and see them go now when there are larger numbers of them. Yeah. It was hard the first few years because, of course, I felt we should keep them here. They're safer here.
Even without DDT, it's a dangerous world out there for a peregrine.
They fly into windows, they get run down by vehicles, wires, they collide with wires, they get into oil spills, they chase pigeons down chimneys. Any kind of injury, even a minor injury when you're a high-performance predator, means death.
And peregrines are the epitome of high performance.
It's essentially a feathered missile. What they do is they hold their feet out with their toes spread wide open in front of them and actually slam into the prey with their feet like that.
First time I ever saw a peregrine stoop, I'll never forget it because it was virtually a calm day, and you could hear the sound about a quarter of a mile. It sounded like ripping canvas. The sound of the air going through its wings. It's just incredible.
There's a great story about peregrine falcons. I've read it a couple of times in books about this guy who was flying a pursuit plane before the Second World War, an aviator, and he was practicing diving on ducks, and he was going over 200 miles an hour in a dive, and a peregrine falcon passed him.
Combine stories like that with the breeding success the program was beginning to have, and those high-performance peregrines became high-profile symbols of what we had done wrong and could maybe do right with the environment.
Well, it's going to take a bit of looking.
Richard Fife has boxes full of write-ups on the peregrine work. For a time, everyone wanted a piece of the story.
Here's one, Come Back to the Peregrine. It's in Reader's Digest. Yeah, Reader's Digest.
That's when the politics began again. Fife had won the battle to begin the program 10 years earlier. Now he had to win the right to keep it.
We had at one point a time when there was an attempt from headquarters in Ottawa to take over the raptor program for the country, and I had been heading it up for something like 15 years, and all of a sudden, no, this will come out of Ottawa. Well, we were getting press and publicity, and it's high profile, so I'm sure some people were a little jealous of us.
Jealousy, perhaps. Suspicion, definitely. Richard Fife and Phil Treffry had made no secret of their close ties with falconers, people who hunt with birds. Falconry was frowned on by many in the Wildlife Service. For years, provinces including Alberta banned it, fearing too many birds were being taken from the wild. but it's a sport with deep roots.
You know, they were kept and trained for falconry long before the invention of gunpowder. You know, it's hard to imagine how important they were to medieval society. The nobility trained and recreated with falcons. The common people kept hawks as a subsistence system, so they were an ordinary part of everyday life.
There you go, look, look, look. See it?
Treffry believes those centuries of shared experience are a big reason the breeding program succeeded.
Falconers could tell whether their birds were in good condition, whether they were under stress or at ease. And we took the same sort of basic behavioral understandings and applied them to the birds in the captive breeding pens.
In some ways, this put us way ahead of programs like the whooping crane. You know, to this day, we've done better than the whooping crane program by far, but they had to start from scratch. We started, in a sense, from 2,000 years of knowledge.
Still, even this advantage came with a price.
Nice color.
Head office was worried that the breeding program's links with falconry might lead to birds being sold on the black market, so they launched an investigation.
This was the biggest blow that we had, the most serious blow to the project.
Richard Fife's personal finances were investigated by the RCMP.
They had these inflated figures. They thought falcons were worth $200,000 and all this sort of stuff. And they felt that nobody can work with those and not be selling them. And you just can't do it and not be on the take.
What was a bird worth?
Oh, I have no idea. I know that now, today, with the captive breeding programs, that the peregrine falcon can be purchased at anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a bird. Hell, it costs more than that, or heck, it costs more than that to go, to go and get the birds.
In this case, bureaucratic passion for paper paid off. Years of carefully kept records showed all the program's birds were accounted for. Fife was eventually cleared, but not before he decided to retire from the program.
I felt that if I was out, maybe this would allow Phil and Helen and the other people to let the project go ahead, because I don't think I could have been able to work with the provincial agencies anymore.
Operation Falcon is little more than an unwanted memory for Phil Treffry.
Many of us have outlived it, and now we look back at it as just one of those little blips on the history of the peregrine falcon, you know, like dealing with a bad disease.
By the 90s, almost 36 falcon pairs had established themselves on the Canadian prairie, and there were more farther south. And anyone who's ever worked with the birds will tell you peregrines themselves deserve much of the credit.
Perhaps its very fierce nature is a part of it. It strong defends its young, it strongly defends its nesting area and things like that. All of this enhanced the potential for success.
They're survivors. They don't give up. They don't give up. They struggle to the end.
For the Treffrys, this is the end of their peregrine profession. They'll move on to new species that need the resources that had been directed towards the peregrine. Still, it's not easy to stop.
I will go to my grave, with this love for peregrine falcons, I guess. It's hard to imagine any other bird taking their place.
We've seen the birds fledge from a facility. We were the sort of foster parents for a short time, and now they're on their own, and you just have to hope that they do the best, just like when your children fledge, I guess.
And for Richard Fife, in spite of it all, there are no regrets.
How many people have the opportunity to work with something that they love and then to be successful with it, It's just been a privilege that you couldn't pay for.
For the magazine, I'm Jim McQuarrie, overlooking the Red Deer River.